What's going on, guys? So I've always wondered, what is the number one thing that will not only change a person to be able to accomplish everything and anything that they want, but even after they do that, right? The next step or the next question that I would then ask myself is like, how do you teach that? If I as an individual completed that and I did all the things that I wanted to do in my life, how do I then teach that to my family? How do I then teach that to my kids? If I end up making a lot of money, right? Let's just say, for example, I invent something crazy. I become a professional athlete and I make tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. I win the lottery, whatever. Like, just think about all that. Think about if you go all these different steps, you make a ton of money, you then learn how to save that money. You then learn how not to spend the money and invest it so that it actually survives forever, right? Think about all these different scenarios of like, when you actually finally become quote unquote successful, how do you teach that to the next person? How do you teach that to your kids so that that doesn't get lost from generation to generation? I have been asking myself for over a decade, what has most families lose their wealth from year to year, from generation to generation? It is very, very common. And I don't know what the actual statistics are, but I believe that usually by the third generation, a family who has generated tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, that money is completely gone, right? I think it's like 50 to 70% of that money is usually gone by the second generation. By the third generation, it's like a very low percentage. It is a very small amount of people, or families I should say, that actually keep their wealth for multiple generations. We hear about the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the family that created JP Morgan. I can't quite remember the name of where they come from, but think about all those families, right? Let's think about the Waltons even now, right? Bill Walton Sr. created Walmart, and now his kids, who are like in their 70s, I believe, have carried on the legacy. Walmart is bigger than it's ever been. All three of his kids, I think it's three of them, are multi-billionaires, probably deca-millionaires, I think. I'm pretty sure it's deca-millionaires at this point, multi-deca, I think. And so that means they have grandchildren already, right? So how are they going to make sure that their kids continue this legacy, that their kids remain billionaires? How are they going to make sure that their children, or their grandchildren, I should say, are going to remain billionaires? I've been wondering this for a long time, because I'm like, what is the point of making all this money if then it's going to get lost by my kids or their kids? I'm still on this path to make a ton of money. Maybe I'll never get there, so maybe it won't matter. I highly doubt that, but that is the goal. But still, like, whether I do or not, it's a question that I've always wondered, and I've kind of came down to one conclusion. Like, there's a lot of variables and a lot of factors that I think affect this, but one of the number one things that I've noticed in very successful people is that they do not complain. They just don't complain. What happens when we're not complaining, right? Think about it. When you're not complaining, you basically put your mind in a state of finding solutions, right? So if you're always constantly looking for solutions instead of complaining, what are you doing versus what could you have been doing, right? When you're in a complaining state, you're in a victim state. I think it's pretty straightforward. Like, I think most people would agree on that. And even if you didn't, like, it'd be hard for you to convince me otherwise. Like, if you are constantly complaining, you're literally in a victim state all the time. When you're in a victim state, you're not in a creative state, right? You're not in a high frequency state. So it is harder to actually get things done. It is harder to energetically manifest things. It is harder to attract certain things. What would happen if you didn't complain? And so I've noticed that I'm a recovering complainer. Like, I'm not gonna say that I don't complain. I complain. We're human. I think most humans complain no matter what level that you're at. But the less that you complain, I believe, is a high correlation to the more success that you have. If I think back to where I was 10 years ago or 5 years ago and where I am today, my complaining level has severely diminished, like severely diminished. And so what does that create? Well, that makes successful people think differently, right? If you're not complaining, then it starts shifting your mind in a way where you start looking at things from a different angle. And so when you start looking at things from a different angle, you're able to see things that other people can't see, right? You catch opportunities, you catch momentum, you allow your brain to take you to your subconscious and remember things that you forgot about. It allows you to be creative. And so now imagine if your kids did not complain and they actually were able to do that. What would then happen? When they're not complaining, they're solving problems, right? So what are some examples of these? Let's say, for example, your kid comes to you and it's like, oh my God, this homework is so hard. I don't know what to do with it. It's always so hard. That's complaining, right? How could you get them to shift that perspective and actually start looking at things differently? By asking questions. Ask them questions like, hey, what could you do so that it is not hard? Who can you ask? Could you work on this longer? Right? You can ask various questions that then has them start thinking differently versus complaining. Even with working out, right? Or even if you're trying to push your kid to do the dishes, right? To go work out. And they're just like, oh my God, I don't want to do the dishes. Oh, I'm so tired already. Like if you take them to go running or go training for a sport that they're in, it's all complaining. And so what if you can get them to shift that every single time? What if every time they wanted to complain, you rewired their brain to actually look for a solution, to actually look for an answer, to actually come up with a way to solve the problem? Complaining is the total opposite of problem solving. And so now imagine if you were in a constant state of problem solving all the time. From what are you gonna wear today to how am I going to create the next software that's going to revolutionize the world, to then write the best song that will be lived on for the next 100 years, to draw the best piece of art that will be remembered 50 years from now. The list is endless. And so when you're in a constant state of creating, of solving, you are not complaining. And so it completely rewires your brain to start looking at life and all the day-to-day things that you do from a completely different angle. And so that then has you become somebody who takes responsibility versus somebody who's in a constant state of blaming others, right? So when you're in responsibility, you're not being a victim. When you're not being a victim, you're being a creator. And so when you're in a creator state and you're not making excuses, that's when you then take action, right? Successful people create and then they take action. People who are not successful are victims and all they do is create excuses. I'm thinking to myself, like, how am I going to teach my kids to, think different? To maybe be a little bit like me, right? Like wanting to be better all the time. And it's like, teach them to not complain. I do my best to every time that my kids start complaining, I try and get them to turn it. So I have 3 kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old. 4-year-old's about to be 5. The 3-year-old's a little hard right now. Like this guy just wants to do whatever he wants. Like he can kind of listen, so he's kind of hearing me, so I still tell him. But most likely he's not really gonna like get it through, right? My 5-year-old, who's about to be 5 actually, she's 4, but she's about to be 5, she can kind of hear it. I can kind of see her trying to turn it, but it's a little bit harder. But my 8-year-old now, there's no excuses. Like I think at that age, like for sure, there's absolutely no reason why they should make any excuses. And so every time my 8-year-old starts making an excuse, I get her to shift it right there, right now. What you got to do, stop what you're doing and like, let's solve the problem. Right? So even if I have to repeat it 1,000 times to them, my goal is going to be like, how can I get my 3 kids to never complain? Well, for 1, I got to stop complaining. And for 2, I got to continuously keep telling them, instead of telling them don't complain, right? And I want to rewire them to think differently, then I get to rewire them to be thinkers, to be problem solvers. So instead of telling them don't be complaining, I get to ask questions, right? Ask questions towards gearing them, towards guiding them, towards solving a problem. And I believe that if I'm able to do that at a high level and they have a strong foundation, I'll never have to worry about them being successful or not. They will create the life of their dreams by just that one habit. And if I end up making a lot of money, right? And I'm talking about like a lot of money, like generational type money, maybe they won't burn it. Because if I catch in any way that they might burn it, I'm gonna give it all away. I would much rather give it away than just burn it and do nothing with it. So that is all I wanted to share with you guys today. And then I will catch you on the next video. Peace.